Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Disrupting Process to Dismantle Culture, with Scott Ashford, who is Kearney Dean of Engineering from Oregon State University. Hi, Scott. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody.
My name is Greta Leibniz, and I'm co-PI and project director for the Engineering Dean's Gender Equity, or EDGE, initiative, and I'll serve as host for today's webinar. As you participate, I want you to be thinking about what you will do with the information you learned today. With action in mind, I'll begin by showcasing resources developed by the EDGE initiative team, and we've designed these resources to help deans accelerate change to promote gender diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the first resource I want to share with you is clearly our webpage. All the resources that I share today will be accessible here as well as others. Please note you can sign up to join our EDGE listserv to receive our latest and greatest information. So I want to draw your attention to one of the website pages as our second resource. Here is the EDGE Dean's Gender Equity Change Checklist with accompanying tools and resources. The checklist outlines a process for accelerating gender diversity, equity, and inclusion change based on the multicultural organizational development models. We know that checklists can be incredibly valuable. And by way of example, one of the resources under the EDGE Gender Equity Change Checklist is the Dean Personal Self-Assessment Questionnaire. And this questionnaire helps deans to identify personal actions they can take on a daily as well as long-term basis to foster gender diversity, equity, and inclusion in their culture. So this questionnaire was actually produced by demand from our deans that participated in our 2019 EDGE Action Steps workshop. Which brings me to our third resource, our Action Steps workshop. In 2019, we hosted a day-long post-EDI, or Engineering Deans Institute, Action Steps workshop that was enthusiastically received by over 40 engineering deans, and so much so that they invited us back to participate in the 2020 EDI. And so for 2020, the Taste of EDGE Action Steps workshop, we have a fabulous lineup of speakers, including today's showcase dean, Scott. Please consider registering for the pre-EDI morning workshop, April 14th, 2020. So the fourth resource I want to highlight is the 2019 EDGE Engineering Dean Survey. Dr. Virginia Valian, who's an internationally renowned gender equity research and who helped lead this effort, showcased some results of this research in the first EDGE Deans Showcase webinar. She found that although deans were very well intentioned and say they hold leaders of faculty accountable for fostering a diverse, equitable, and inclusive climate, deans don't actually collect the data necessary to hold those leaders accountable for change. For example, how can you hold people accountable for equitable teaching and service loads if you don't actually collect data on teaching and service load by gender? So a key takeaway from the research was that deans needed a tool to help collect this type of data. That brings me to our fifth resource, hearing the need for a gender diversity, equity, and inclusion self-assessment tool that was engineering specific and applicable at the college level. The EDGE team created a state-of-the-art engineering college self-assessment tool. And this tool is a two-part quantitative and qualitative assessment tool based on the work of our colleagues at the Association for Public Land-Grant Universities, APLU. These colleagues, Dr. Griffin and Mabe, were part of our second Dean's Showcase webinar, in which they shared their faculty diversity tool that they developed, and that is the foundation for the EDGE College Self-Assessment Tool. So the EDGE College Self-Assessment Tool actually has a very elite pedigree that will set deans up to not only be in a better position to understand gender diversity, equity, and inclusion needs of their college, but also provide useful data to inform grant proposals like NSF's advanced grants, or apply for awards such as ASWE's Faculty Diversity Award or AAAS's National STEM Equity Achievement, or SEA Change Award. This brings us to our final resource that I've alluded to in the past couple slides, and the reason for gathering today, namely the EDGE Deans Showcase webinar series. And this webinar series was created to provide deans with evidence-based tools to accelerate change on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as provide them with evidentiary proofs of College of Engineering deans that have actually been successful in effectively leading positive college-level diversity, equity, and inclusion change. In the webinar previously, we showcased Dean Ala Kabaj from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley's College of Engineering and Computer Science. And today, we're providing you with another wonderful Dean exemplar who's been in the forefront of gender equity diversity efforts for a number of years. In the past 5 years, as Dean of the College of Engineering at OSU, Dr. Ashford's efforts have led to the doubling of the number of women in the College of Engineering, such that Oregon State University now ranks number 3 among public research-intensive universities for the percentage of engineering faculty who are women. And he's received a number of awards for these efforts. He will share those with you in his presentation. Dr. Ashford, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Gretel, and thank all of you for participating in today's webinar. What I'd like to talk with you about today is disrupting process to dismantle culture. Changing culture is hard. Engineering, like other STEM fields, has been historically dominated by white males. And today I'm going to share with you what we've done at the College of Engineering at Oregon State University to get to the root cause of the institutional biases at play in order to shift our culture and create a more diverse and inclusive environment. What I'd like to start out with is introduce you to Isabella Gutowski. Isabella got her Ph.D. here in nuclear engineering at Oregon State, and then she returned to her home country of Poland. One of the things that she found when she got back to Poland was that it was not the environment, the community that she had become used to at Oregon State. And when she saw a posting for a faculty position in nuclear engineering at Oregon State, she knew that she wanted to come back. In terms of why she was so eager to return, Isabella says that she knew what to expect in terms of collaboration between employees, in terms of atmosphere on campus, in terms of basic support of research and faculty, and how great of a community it is to be a part of. And the environment that Isabella is referring to is more than just a beautiful place to live, which it is here in Oregon, but it's one that we've been working hard to create over the last several years. As Gretel said, we have more than doubled the number of female engineering faculty over the last 5 years. Over 25% of our faculty are women, and we now have 53 female faculty in our College of Engineering. That puts us among the top 3 public R1 research universities in the nation when looking at the percentage of faculty who are women. And I was honored this past fall by the Society of Women Engineers with the Rodney Chipp Memorial Award for our efforts in supporting women in engineering. And the College of Engineering was also identified by ASW as an exemplar recipient of the Bronze Award in the ASW Diversity Recognition Program, the highest recognition given in the program's inaugural year last year. So how did we accomplish this? It takes a lot more than simply having good intentions and believing in a more diverse faculty. Being a cheerleader and a champion of diversity isn't enough. So what really started the ball rolling on this initiative dates back to my beginning days as dean, and I participated in the first cohort of the Oregon State Advanced program. It was a 60-hour intensive bias training workshop funded by the National Science Foundation. This program is centered on analyzing the operations of difference, power, and privilege in higher education, particularly in the STEM fields. It was designed to increase the participation and advancement of women in academic science and engineering careers, and aimed at the development of systematic approaches to address inequity and advance women in academic STEM careers. For me, this program was transformational, as it really opened my eyes to the depth of the problem that we were facing and made me take a hard look at the institutional practices that were inadvertently creating barriers for women. When I became Dean of College of Engineering in 2014, I made sure that we had a goal related to creating an inclusive and collaborative community in our College of Engineering. Now, the hard part was figuring out how to implement kind of meaningful change and really change a culture that had been built over decades and decades. So looking at in the processes that perpetuate these problems, we knew that we needed to transform our recruitment, hiring, and promotion practices. And we did a number of things. So really the first thing is that we really disrupted how we hire. We expanded our position descriptions to make them as broad as possible to generate as large a pool as possible. You know, we had a history of very narrowly defined openings for some very specific, research area. And we've really broadened the pool. So we currently have a broad search in computer science, all areas of computer science. We also started requiring a diversity statement or a commitment to diversity statement to be submitted along with the teaching and research statements for all of our academic positions. We also have a search advocacy program here on campus that trains employees who serve on search committees to promote equity, validity, and diversity. The College of Engineering made it a requirement to have an external search advocate on each search committee, and the search chair also had to be trained as a search advocate. So we bring in people from outside the unit, basically to bring in some fresh eyes, another set of eyes on the search process, and we also have replaced several committee chairs. If they didn't do the training, they could not serve as chair. So one of the things that we did is that we changed how our outlook on dual career couples. And we really viewed it as an opportunity instead of a problem. And even in the interviews, often candidates would say that we have a dual career problem. And to look at them and just changing that to the opportunity makes a huge difference. I'd like to introduce you to, this is Caitlin Fogg. She's an assistant professor of bioengineering who we hired and actually just started this past year. When I sat down to discuss, a position during her interview, I made sure that she knew about the programs that we had to offer, and I mentioned our dual career hire program. And she said, well, that doesn't apply to me because my husband drives tugboats. We have a whole fleet of research vessels on the coast, and I told her I think we can help. Her husband is now one of our boat captains, working for the university, and really we are committed to working across the entire university to help find opportunities for spouses. And really in the big picture, we're looking at partners, so it actually they don't have to be, legally married. It's really I think we look at a broad tent of folks coming into campus. And it has really transformed and really helped diversify our faculty across the campus.
So one of the most difficult things here is to actually fail a search. So talk to us about that. Yeah, so when we disrupted the hiring practice, we put in, we implemented best practices. The problem is that when you culture change is difficult. And so initially for the first couple of years, sometimes the processes wouldn't be followed, or we'd find candidates that were found unacceptable, really with no good reason. And so I failed several searches over those first couple of years. It sent a message to the entire community that this was a serious matter. And if I look at how things ended up, it doesn't mean that I only hired women or underrepresented candidates. We hired white men as well, but the system was put in place, and we found that system works, and the results speak for themselves. After we disrupted the hiring process, it's one thing to bring people to campus and to get them to join, but the other big part of it is retention and to keep people here. One of the things I've seen, and really anecdotal evidence, that there was implicit bias going on in the promotion and tenure process. And so after analyzing our P&T practices,
we realized that the P&T committees were not clear on their charge as a peer reviewer. Members believed that it was their job to provide their personal judgment on the candidate's suitability rather than objectively evaluating the scholarship and creative activity, really looking at doing an independent evaluation based on our guidelines. And it was more of an independent evaluation. The committees also lacked representation of perspective with respect to gender and rank. And so to address this, we formed new P&T committees and now provide orientation and training, a training process for all of the committees, including at the unit level as well as at the college level. And I provide letters of recommendation in the process, and I believe if there is bias, if I observe bias in any of the other letters, I call that out in my recommendation. And it actually, we've really turned the corner, and I think we have a very good process now, much more representation of the faculty. So something else that we did at Oregon State, so in July 2016, I appointed our first Associate Dean for Faculty Advancement. And the purpose of this leadership role was to support our efforts related to diversity and inclusion. This was an incredible hire. It was one of our internal faculty, but it made a huge difference. And one of the things was it gave faculty and staff someone to go to outside of their unit, not having to come all the way to me, but someone that they could talk to about maybe inequities that they saw in their work. And one of the things in the first year, we cleaned up probably half a dozen what I would say are bad or probably not good circumstances. All of those people are still with us, and they're actually prospering now. We also created a change team led by this associate dean, which had representation of faculty and staff across the college. And that was really grassroots efforts to support the work of the associate dean for faculty advancement. So the change team has brought in speakers and seminars and actually plays to campus. Like this event here featuring Trisha Rose. We hosted a play. Actually, it was the same troupe that has been at EDI for a couple of years. And they presented a play with issues around diversity and bias called Spinning into Butter. And we've also brought in outside consultants to run workshops on a variety of diversity-related topics. There's other things that we do to support our efforts. We started paying the membership fees for faculty that wanted to join SWE, SHIP, and NSBE, really just to help support those organizations for our students. Requiring sexual harassment training now for all of our paid graduate students as a condition of employment. And really simply holding people accountable for inappropriate behavior. In the past, I think we'd often overlook things that went on, and this was something that people now know that they're held accountable, and it is making a difference. So I'm pleased with the progress that we've made, but really this is just the beginning. I think what is next for us, it really takes constant and deliberate work to create a community where everyone feels a sense of belonging. It's hard work, but it's up to us as leaders in higher education to ensure that the community remains a priority. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you might have. Thank you.
Perfect. And we've been getting questions through the chat. So thank you, folks, for sharing your thoughts, your comments, your ideas. We've got one from Virginia Valiant who's joined us today, and she wants to know what type of pushback did you receive as you began implementing these changes? This is not an easy process. I'd love to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, so first we disrupted faculty hiring. And that was, that upset a lot of faculty.
Yes.
They put a lot of effort into it in search, but, for example, we had one search where they decided not to ask for the commitment to diversity statement up front, but asked for it later. And it's like, no, the whole point, right? A big point of that is that people are coming to interview because we're asking for that. I mean, it helps attract people to university. So I failed that search. They will never do that again, right? And that story gets around. I've also failed a couple of searches that where, faculty kind of would cut a deal inside the committee that they'd recommend to candidates. And it just so happened that maybe a candidate that added diversity to the pool was found unacceptable. And by failing those searches, if somebody's trying to mess with the process, there was a lot of hard feelings the first couple of years. We're now 5 years into it, and it's now our process. We've hired a lot of faculty. I think we've hired 60 faculty over the last 4 years. And so it's really a new crop of faculty that's really been able to change the culture in that way. So for promotion and tenure, I just say we had several people resign from our promotion and tenure committee because they thought that if they couldn't give their independent view outside our guidelines, then they didn't want to serve, and that was okay with me.
So the next question that came up was, what gave faculty confidence in your new methods? And it may simply be attrition and raising the folks that buy into the process up to the top. But what would you say gave faculty confidence in your new methods?
So there's a couple things. One, we hired a lot of great faculty. And so the whole idea was to bring the best faculty to campus and trying to get rid of the bias right along the way. I think one of the things that one of the things that gave faculty confidence is when there was a case where, I won't go into detail, but one of the units felt that they had to include a diverse candidate or I would fail the search.
Okay.
And it was a candidate that had actually been excluded maybe earlier on in the process. And so what that showed is that when we mess with the process, right, if we're trying to just bring somebody in because of their diversity, the process doesn't work. They're not competing at the finalist level. And when that all came out, it really, people realized that our process that we have is actually working very well. And that raised the level of confidence, I think, amongst the faculty.
Once they could trust and see the evidence of the process.
Exactly.
Great. I know that another question that has come up is, how did you develop a team that would further your vision?
Well, as I came into Dean pretty abruptly a few years ago, I'll just leave it at that. And part of that was I was able to pretty much bring in my own leaders over the first couple of years, as well as build out a team of associate deans. But I will say the group that we have, the leaders, much of my leadership, even that first summer as dean, most of my leaders were in that first advanced workshop.
And so the advanced workshop has been instrumental in helping culture change.
Yeah, we had the advanced workshop. We also had tech aid in our mechanical engineering. Yes. And we also had a RED grant in our chemical engineering program. And so I had the workings of the team, and really the leadership was no problem. It was really kind of disrupting that culture, that had been developed over decades at the faculty level.
So what strategies do you have for accountability?
So there's a few things. One, I will, if we, a lot of times you hear about things and people don't take any action. And so I am we work very closely, actually with the Associate Dean for Faculty Advancement. We work with General Counsel's Office, HR, our Center for Equity, Opportunity, and Advancement, Equal Opportunity and Advancement. And really, if we find something that is not right, we take care of it, right? We take action. We don't acknowledge it and kind of keep going. We also hold people accountable for training. For me, a free week, for the graduate students, 100% of our students, need to be trained, and we're about 96% right now, but that's really not enough. And so I think holding people accountable, making sure we follow through with what we say we're going to do, and then just making sure that it is always top of mind, that we're not, that we don't take some accomplishments and then kind of move on, but we're always working on it.
Okay, I've got another question from Catherine. She's asking, how do you determine if your pool is diverse? Do you request applicant disclosure of race and gender?
Yeah, so we stay out of that. What we do is we work with our office of, actually the search advocates office. So there's Ann Gillies, and you can see there, she has an article actually in Chronicle of Higher Ed from a few years ago. She developed and runs our search advocate program. And the associate dean for faculty advancement, the way that our process works is at the unit level, when we're looking at the phone interview list, we'll send that centrally and see if it's, is it as diverse as the pool, nationally available pool of recent PhDs in those fields. And also we looked at, and they suggest if there's any additional candidates that we might look at. And so I stay out of that process. We really just see if there's, if we do not have a diverse pool that kind of meets the national available pool, then we may delay the search and increase our efforts to advertise and get the word of mouth out to maybe increase the diversity of the pool and just take a break.
How do you get a sense of what that national availability pool is to reflect from?
Yeah, there is I don't know what the report is, but somewhere there is a report on really the diversity of recent PhD students in different disciplines in engineering.
Right, and that's what you use.
Yeah, we use that.
Perfect, yep.
And go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, and where do you source your applicants from to ensure that you have a diverse applicant pool? For example, are you a member of the HERC, the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium? We
might be.
Fair enough.
My team. So I think the best way to the most successful thing for us has been recruiting at conferences. It's really it's recruiting at conferences, and it's our faculty, right? I mean, it's really the faculty seeing soon to be PhDs at conferences and telling them about what we have going on at Oregon State. And I think the word of mouth is probably the best thing that we do, though we are getting the word out also at, like the SWE conference and other conferences that are out there. But I think the word of mouth is most successful.
And do you provide faculty with funds to recruit at conferences? Do you send them specifically to do recruiting?
Yeah, so some conferences the college pays to send them specifically to do recruiting. Others, since it's becoming part of our culture, the faculty just do it, right? And if they need help, we can cut a deal. But really, what they're looking for, it's in their best interest to find great faculty to join their units, and
their
so
department, yeah,
they're excited about it. And it's and we're now reaching a critical mass. I mean, we have really, I think, such a diverse faculty that it's really now kind of taking on its own life, which is very exciting.
Did you document your changes by updating the college's operating manual or some other way?
Yeah, we had very little policies in the past, and so we do have a written policy on how the search process goes. We also, so that is one piece that we have formalized, and we update. We started out, there are some things we're doing that really weren't all that effective. So we kind of took, for example, we initially required the chair of a search committee to be from outside of the area. So really manage the search and kind of at the very highest level, get rid of that implicit bias.
Wow.
And what we found is, one, the faculty really didn't like that.
Yeah.
And it also wasn't all that effective. And so the training for search advocacy, that was more effective. And so we walked back that policy, and the faculty appreciated it. We are trying to get more policies in place just because we haven't had very many. And I think there's, to make lasting effect, I think we really do need to document this so that it really does become part of the system.
But it sounds like you're willing to take action, even if it means pushback, because you're getting faculty upset with you occasionally, is what I'm hearing.
I do, and I'm willing. But what I find is that, overwhelmingly, the faculty support the direction that we're going, and so I'm comforted in that, and really we're just, we're implementing best practice. I think if we were just looking at trying, like mandating that we have a diverse pool when they get to campus, like for the finalist pool, and mandating that and kind of looking at that as the criteria, I think that I don't think that's the right way to go. And I think that we would get a lot more pushback. But the faculty see the process. And if we implement the best practice along the way and stick to that best practice, then whoever comes to campus, even if it's, turns out to be 3, white males, as long as we follow our process, what I see in the results is overall much more diverse faculty.
So it's about designing your process to be evidence-based and best practice as you can get, and trusting that process to deliver the quality and the diversity that you're seeking.
Yes. So, one of the things we do is with the search advocate, all of our searches develop a rubric on how to evaluate the candidates before the first applicant comes in. First, resume is reviewed. And what that does is really sets the stage to evaluate all the candidates fairly. And, I went to Berkeley, right? And so I think historically it's like, well, okay, if they're from Berkeley, they must be good, right? That's kind of how a lot of the searches went, I think, in the past. And now we really having that rubric up front and having the search advocate as part of the committee really allows us to stick to that and to stick to those best practices all the way through.
I think you highlight a bias that was very evident for me in some of my past work, namely the pedigree of where the person came from, the institution, which inherently tended to leave out folks that originated from schools that were predominantly minority serving or otherwise. So it sounds like you've shifted your process so that the pedigree isn't, it'll always be evident, but it won't sway the decision making.
Right.
I'm also wondering if there's language that you use in your notice of vacancy that helps, because how we define best candidate is dependent upon the criteria that we're putting out there. So how are you changing your notice of vacancy to also be able to bring in broad number of candidates?
So we talk a little bit about the community that we have at Oregon State. We are a land grant, and so we really have a balance of this research, teaching, and outreach missions. I think the biggest thing is this, at least when I've talked to candidates, requiring a statement about their commitment to diversity. Simply requiring that has made people apply that weren't looking for jobs. And I've heard that over and over again from our candidates.
We've known about the University of California system. They're getting some kickback about not only did they require that diversity statement, but they use that diversity statement as the first test as to if people didn't have a diversity statement, if it wasn't a high quality diversity statement, those candidates were not even reviewed even if they had a high pedigree and they had great quality research and teaching. What do you think about that? Love your feedback.
Yeah, so for us, it's part of a holistic review. And honestly, part of it is to get people to apply, right? And it also starts the search committee thinking about those things early on in the process. So a big piece of requesting it is simply to raise that awareness level at the committee level and among the applicants. And then we don't use it as a screening criteria because everything, if you look at best practice, everything around, that we look at is how do we, for our criteria, we are looking how are we inclusive, right? How do we not screen people out, but how do we screen people in? And when's the right time to evaluate? It may be that for a commitment to, a commitment to diversity, there's some of that in that statement, but it also is something that we can also evaluate at the phone interview, right? It also is something that we can evaluate when they come to campus. I don't know how many times we've brought people to campus that have shown disrespect to the staff, right? Great meetings with the faculty, disrespecting the staff. And if you're trying to create a community with everyone having a sense of belonging, that doesn't, you wouldn't see that anywhere until the campus visit. So a holistic review and trying to screen people in as long as we can.
Wonderful. One last question for you, and that is, actually two last questions for you. The changes you mentioned that were made to the promotion and tenure process, were they implemented at the campus level or at the college level?
These were the college level.
Okay. And
level and also at the unit, and working also with the units.
Okay. And one last question was, do you measure informal service and mentoring?
Yeah, service is something. So we're at Oregon State. We have a very flexible position description. So our faculty, we kind of have a standard, 50% teaching, 40% research, 10% service. That's where everybody starts. We try not to change that a whole lot until someone is tenured. But then we look at, we also really protect our faculty, particularly the female faculty or faculty from underrepresented populations, because the university, they're on a list at the university, they're asked to do way more service than anybody else. And so one is that we talk about, have open discussion about that, and we kind of shield them from excessive service. But we also then, once somebody's tenured, we are very flexible on the position description. And so if somebody is excited about doing service and they're excited about getting out to the community and, increasing maybe the participating with SWE to increase the number of women in STEM, then we can give 15 or 20% service and cut back maybe on the research expectations or teaching expectations. And as you become full professor, it even becomes more flexible.
Sounds like you build in that flexibility and you make it developmental. The changes occur as the person changes in rank too.
Want to make sure they get promoted, because we're in a system where we have, we don't ask if they get tenure somewhere else here, but we do get the letters of recommendation, and we're at a different place, I think, than a lot of our peers. And so we want to make sure that our faculty are not held back because we're giving them maybe too much flexibility early on.
No, I guess I see one last burning question, which is, have you tracked success in tenure and time at associate professor rank?
We are. I started tracking when we were, I was actually at an OSU, Oregon State advanced workshop, and somebody introduced me by saying that we don't have one female full professor ever promoted at Oregon State, which one was not true. And secondly, I look at the work that we've done, and I will say, so we are tracking it, and I will say that for us, we've grown so rapidly, some of our, like in mechanical engineering, half of our faculty are assistant professors. And
Okay.
so it's really a unique opportunity that we are able to track. And so, yes, we do. And I can share that information after the webinar if that's of useful use to anybody.
Perfect. Okay, that is the end of our question and answer, but we look forward to receiving more questions, and certainly we can share those questions with Scott afterwards if people have others that they would like to have him to answer. At this point, I would like to just highlight again some of the next steps that you can consider for your action, because we want you to engage in action after this webinar. First, the newest thing is simply we want people to register for our EDI Taste of Edge workshop. That's April 14th. We also, if you have not signed the ASWE Dean's Diversity Pledge, please sign that pledge. Join our EDGE listserv to learn more about what we're offering and review our past webinars. We will be sending out a recording for this webinar, so you can share this with colleagues if you'd like. We do have another webinar coming up March 31st with Dean Sharon Walker from Drexel University. So we would encourage you to register for her webinar. The other options are to use or at least try the state-of-the-art EDGE College Self-Assessment Tool. And we are using that College Self-Assessment Tool. We want to gather a group of pilot deans together who are interested in using this tool, because we're also using this tool as a foundation for what we hope will be ASWE's National Gender Equity Indicators database. So we want to figure out what slice of those questions would be most useful to folks across the nation. And we'd love to have deans contribute to that work. And finally, check out our EDGE app. And this is an app for total engineering faculty counts, and we're working to update the underrepresented minority information and incorporate. We've currently got 5 years of ASWE profiles data. We hope to have all 20 very soon. So this is a great resource for folks. If you have any questions regarding the EDGE project, you're welcome to contact me directly. And other than that, Scott, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your work, your time, and your effort in putting this webinar together for us. And I just want to continue to cheerlead and showcase your work. So thank you.
Thank you, Gretel. It's my pleasure.